Welcome everyone to TransPerfect's Trial Interactive eClinical webinar series. My name is Laurel Ann Schrader, and I'm an Associate Director in the Life Sciences Solution Division of TransPerfect. I have 17 years experience in the TMF, both on the CRO and sponsor side. After our panelists have presented, I will be sharing two short case studies of examples of a successful sponsor and CRO-owned approaches, witnessed from the perspective of the technology partner. If you're joining us today, you likely are currently making decisions about your eTMF strategy, or you're thinking about making adjustments to your current strategy, or you're just curious to hear from your peers about their experiences. We've gathered two additional presenters today to share some perspective on two different approaches to eTMF management, sponsor-owned and CRO-owned. We have Lei Tu Nguyen, a senior clinical document manager from a sponsor, who will discuss how a sponsor-owned strategy is effective for her team. And we have Amafa Osei, Senior Director, Records Management Compliance for Worldwide Clinical Trials, who will discuss how a CRO-owned approach is working for the sponsors they support. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature to type them in, and the panelists will respond to as many as possible at the end of our session. Lei Tu will get us started on the sponsor approach.
Lei Tu, you might be on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lei Tu Nguyen. Thank you, Lorianne. As Lorianne has mentioned, I'm Lei Tu Nguyen, and I've been in pharmaceutical for 17 years, all on the sponsor side, ranging from small pharma to big pharma. And I've had experience with working with homegrown systems to hybrids to paper systems. And today I will be talking about reasons why we picked the current TMF that we did. Next slide. So some of the reasons why we picked Trial Interactive is the user-friendly of the actual system. The system and the layout is very straightforward and very easy to understand for any user. So for instance, if you are even new to TMF, it's very easy to follow. The layout is trial level, country level, and site level. So from any TMF perspective, the filing is very easy. And also the way that the system is, it's very easy to do cross-finding documents or searching documents, and also the way that you want to file things is very self-explanatory. It's the same layout as the DIA module, and so with that, it's very, very easy to use. And also one of our biggest thing is that, as you may know, with functional groups, it's very hard to get functional groups to file their documents into the TMF. Although majority of the documents, about 70% of the TMF comes from ClinOps, the other 30% comes from your functional groups. And with the functional groups being able to see how easy the layout is and how user-friendly it is, it makes it a little bit easier to get their buy-in to use the system. And one of the other main reasons is the cost. The cost was what really worked for us compared to other vendors. The system did everything it needs to do, and it was something that we thought as a business owner was the best system that was for us. Other systems, even though our other functional groups might have systems that talk to each other, we did not find that was something that we needed, because some systems have more bells and whistles than we wanted. And so we decided, for cost and the user-friendly of this system, we picked Trial Interactive. And the last thing is Trial Interactive is one of the only vendors that actually has two different components. One is they have a team that can file and sort your documents on your behalf. So if you're from a small or medium-sized company and you don't have the whole TMF team to be filing documents for you, Trial Interactive has the capability of providing you that service. And that was something that we've used in the past, and we liked it. And then the other thing is that they have a project manager that they assign to you, and it's really nice to have someone that you know that you can always call or turn to when you have anything wrong with the system or any questions at all. So with those reasons, that is why we picked Trial Interactive as our TMF. Next slide. Now I'll be talking about why owning our TMF works for us. As I mentioned that we used to, working from small pharma, big pharma, it all depends on the need of your company. If your company is really small, then you might want to use the CRO's TMF. But as our company grew, we decided that we wanted to bring this TMF system in-house. And instead of using our CROs, we decided to go with our own. The main reason for that is the consistent structure across all programs. We have multiple programs at our company, and with the size of our company, a lot of the team members actually work on several programs. So with working on several programs, and if you're having a system held by your CRO, each CRO might be, their file structure might be different, which makes it a little bit more difficult for a team member to jump on one study to another, because it could be a little bit confusing. So for us, it was ideally for multiple programs and for the ease of personnel to go from one study to the next. And also, next slide, please. Also, it makes it a lot easier for us to manage and control the access to the system. As I had mentioned earlier, the functional groups to add documents, this is where it becomes a really big help, is that if you own your own system, getting the functional groups like data management, stats, safety, and regulatory and drug supply to upload their documents, it is much easier to get their buy-in and to get their input in to add their documents. Whereas, you know, if you don't have that, then it's a lot of chasing down to get all those documents. So for me, it's a lot easier that since we have our own system, regardless of what study and what program they're on, they know that when they submit their documents, it goes to the same sections for every program, every study. And then the other reason is that there's no decommission. So because we own the system is always accessible to us. The files are always there. We can always pull it up at any time, even if the study is closed. And it's important for us because you still have the search function. You still have the capability of searching or looking at archive studies. Whereas if you were to have this hosted by a CRO, the data is now on an electronic device, whether it be a thumb drive or a CD, and most of it would be a flat PDF file where the search capability would not be as fast or as user-friendly as what you would want if it was still on a system. And so, next slide. The last reason is that for a large study that is across multi-country, you would have multi-CROs. For us, it's more ideal to have everybody on one system versus if it's a big study, you might have one main CRO that might be the host of the TMF, and then all the other CROs will use that TMF. That gets a little bit more complicated. So for all these reasons, that's why we chose to go with our own system in-house. And hopefully you will find what works best for you depending on the size of your company and where you're at and how many studies and programs you have. Now I would turn it over to Mo Fosse from Worldwide.
Thanks, Leitu. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. So as Leitu says, my name is Mo Fose. I'm the Senior Director here at Worldwide, and I'm the business owner for the Worldwide TMF system and also serve as the process owner. So I'm responsible for our SOPs that govern the TMF processes, looking at the QC, and I work in partnership with our project teams to ensure that our TMFs are inspection ready. I've got nearly 25 years worth of experience in records management, and the TMF has been a large focus in the last, 15 odd years or so. And I've worked on both the sponsor side and the CRO side of the business. So as many of you know, that getting the TMF right is challenging. It is a leading cause, if not the leading cause, of inspection findings across our industry. Next slide. So with that in mind, it's really important to pick the right partners to assist in navigating through the TMF challenge. So Worldwide is agnostic when it comes to TMF technologies. There's many out there. And as a CRO, we've got lots of experience using most of the leading TMF systems out there on the market, and each obviously has their pros and cons. However, for the bulk of our TMF systems, we use Trial Interactive if we're not using a sponsor-hosted system. So if we move on to the next slide, we can just go into some of the reasons why we picked Trial Interactive as a solution. So I'll start off really basic. So when you are considering picking a TMF solution, it's really important to define your user requirements, be very clear and detailed about them, and then pick a system that best meets those requirements. So are you looking at accessibility, functionality? Is reporting important to you? How are you going to look at archiving, validation, inspection readiness? The chances are each of those elements have some form of importance. It's not a definitive list, but you really need to make sure that you define your requirements and have very clear understanding of what you're looking for from a TMF system. When Worldwide picked Trial Interactive for the bulk of their TMFs, we picked them because it had a very configurable product. And in the years I've been working within the TMF, the focus has shifted a lot from paper TMF to an eTMF. And there's a lot of scrutiny on the TMF processes from both our sponsors and also the regulators. The regulatory environment has changed a lot in the years that I've been working in the TMF. So we needed a system that can be flexible to adapt to the changes that have occurred in the last few years. Trial Interactive helped us implement the TMF reference model, which was relatively new when the system was picked, and that really helped us to adhere to the standards. One of the things that I'm passionate about is making sure that the users of the TMF, both from a sponsor side or internally to the project team, that the interface is intuitive, that is easy for people to follow. The system really needs to work for the individuals. The TMF folk are only pretty familiar with the eTMF, but obviously most of the people giving documents into the TMF are not TMF experts, so the system needs to be intuitive. So for example, if they can't get documents in on time, then frankly the TMF is not going to be inspection ready. If documents are not coming in with the right quality, then that could cause rework. And if milestones are not being met, then obviously the TMF is going to be incomplete. So you need to make sure when you're considering picking a system that you pick a system that can help manage the areas that are most important for you. And obviously Trial Interactive helped us with many of those use cases. And again, I know I'm going back to basics here, but do not pick a system and then decide how to use it. I have seen that happen. It's really important to define your requirements first before you even look at the environment out there and the providers. Next slide, please. So as you're deciding on when to procure your own system or to use a CRO system, there are a few considerations to make. And I'll go through these in the next few slides, but there's no right or wrong answers here. It's about what best fits you and your organization. Next slide. So if you're using the CRO system, what that allows you to do and the project team to do is to work in the same way, regardless of the type of trial, regardless of the study design, regardless of the sponsor. So for example, the submission process, we have a number of ways to get documents into our TMF, via paper, via scanned images, sending documents via email, uploading directly from within the system, or integrations between other source systems of TMF documents. Or another example is the QC process, defining who is responsible for the content, who's responsible for filing documents in the right area, or understanding the interactions between the sponsors into our eTMF and the vendors. So what we try and do is to have a unified process across all the different touch points within a TMF. Fine tuning can occur obviously on negotiation between the sponsor and the CRO, and fine tuning is normally around things like timelines. So how quickly should something be done, or is there a requirement to manage paper in addition to an eTMF or not? So those are things that can be fine-tuned. But what we try and do within Worldwide, if we're using our system, is to have one unified way that the clinical operations team, the project managers know how to use, and they use for virtually every single study that we manage. And obviously that helps reduce room or reduces the room for errors and make sure quality is paramount. We want to make sure that we define very clearly who does what. The sponsor plays a heavy part in defining what that looks like. And we have a full set of plans and templates to ensure that we can execute a TMF quickly and get it up and running quickly. So we have plans, we have structures, we have definitions on terms of who submit documents for all the different types of users. Next slide. So another advantage of using a CRO system is wherever possible, our TMF is integrated with some of our other solutions. So for example, our CTMS data comes from our CTMS tool, and that tells us when a visit happens, who's gone to the site, what the site address is, it gives us the PI name. There's lots of data that is held within CTMS. Or with the study or site green light process, data's coming in from our study startup tools to indicate that IP can be shipped to site, or that the site is ready to receive the IP. Or the last example is milestone information is coming from our project management tools. So for example, we'll have data coming in to say, okay, CSR is due or has been written, or the first patient in is due on this particular date. All these data points are collated for consumption into our eTMF. So as most of you most likely know, inspection readiness is a key topic, and it's vital to have this information to validate where you are within any given TMF at any time. This allows hopefully for good reporting and prompt escalation to the sponsor if needed, to the vendors if needed, and to the project teams if needed. So we have elements within our system that provides touch points between the systems so that we can use the TMF as not as a repository, but as an active management tool to ensure that the TMF is telling the story of reconstructing the trial. One other thing I'll mention in terms of streamlining our processes and making sure that they're scalable, as I mentioned up front, we use and we see many other TMFs in many different systems, especially for those sponsors that ask us to use those systems. So if we see functionality that we like from another system, we would work very closely with Trilo Interactive to say, hey, we've seen this particular piece of functionality. Can we build that within our product as well? So we want to make sure that we're dealing with best in breed of when it comes to TMF products. And one of the good things about the partnership with Trilo Interactive, they're very open to those discussions. So that really helps us improve and mature. Next slide. So as I mentioned, I'm an advocate of active TMF management. The TMF shouldn't be a repository. It's not where documents are laid to rest. It's a place where documents should be, in theory, created, reviewed, QC'd, and then archived at the end of the study. So as I mentioned earlier, it's really important to have good user experience. Most trials have vendors, some have partners, some have CROs. Normally there's a main CRO and maybe some satellite CROs. So when you are designing your TMF is to ensure or decide who sees what. In my mind, all parties should have access to the TMF if they're contributing to it. But also think about inspections. You know, inspectors, especially within Europe, they want to see audit trails, who submitted what, when was it QC'd and by whom. So think about how you provide that layer of transparency to the whole project team, including sponsors, including vendors, and don't forget about the inspectors as well. Within our tools, we have very clear methodologies and processes to provide that transparency and accessibility to the TMF. So to wrap up, we've got a number of key takeaways from a CRO perspective. Clarify your requirements, document who's doing what and when within all your tools. Ensure that you work with your CROs if you choose to use them as partners. And if you're using their system, leverage all their tools where at all possible. And if you're not using their system, leverage their expertise to help you with your own system and your own system design. So I'll hand over to Laurel Ann and she'll walk you through some case studies.
Thanks, Milf. As a reminder, if you have any questions, please send them through the Q&A feature and we'll review at the end of the webinar. Now, you've heard examples from both Leitu and Mof. I'm just going to highlight a couple of our experiences and how we support both scenarios. Next slide, actually 2 slides. So both parties, like I said, gave examples of case studies that worked for them. I'm going to just, as I said, just review a couple simple case studies and talk about the different processes. So the first one is we had a small pharma company who was brand new to clinical research. They had a very, very small operations team. They had lack of TMF knowledge and overall really didn't understand the concept of the TMF. And so they went ahead and they contracted with a CRO who utilized our service. And what it did was it gave them overall processing. So they handled all of the document process, the document review, inspection readiness. The CRO handled all of that. And then overall, the results of that were they had an inspection ready TMF, they had real-time document status, they had their oversight, and they could clearly communicate with inspectors when inspection took place. We'll go ahead, next slide. So this is a little bit larger of a case study. A mid-sized pharma company specializing in autoimmune diseases had a very large operations team. However, they had their system in a non-compliant eTMF, so maybe just a shared drive. They had, and that was just their sponsor level or program level documents. And then they had multiple CROs and they consistently were complaining about inconsistent filing, naming structures, they couldn't locate things, their metrics were unavailable, they couldn't gather any metrics from their CROs, and they needed to be manually created. So what they did is they actually contracted with Trial Interactive for a couple different things. So the first thing they started with was some consulting services. So we worked with them on process, change management, their overall business process. We talked about TMF best practices. We talked about being inspection ready, and we did multiple workshops with them on that. And they also contracted with our services as well to assist them in some audit functionality to ensure their inspection readiness. So overall, their results were they had an inspection ready TMF, They had consistent filing where they could pull reports real time. They could gather metrics directly from the system. All of their TMFs were housed in one compliant location, and they had an updated business process to help them succeed in the future. So I think all three of us have mentioned some key takeaways. And the most important thing is there is no wrong choice as long as you ensure your TMF is inspection ready, that you understand the regulations and what is required of you as a sponsor, that you have proper TMF oversight, and that you have an understanding of your TMF and how it's run and who's running it. And again, the most important thing, I can't stress that enough, is ensuring that it is inspection ready. Once again, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A feature. We're here to answer those for you. And we're going to go ahead and kick off the Q&A now. Will, our communications and product strategist, will read any questions that have come through, and we'll take some time to answer those. Will?
Thanks, Laura-Ann. We have just a couple questions. I encourage everyone, we have time, so if you're thinking of anything after you've listened to the presentation, you can go ahead and add them into the question portal, as Laura-Ann said. There's one question about registration. Apparently there was somebody who had trouble accessing. If you can have them contact me at webinars@trialinteractive.com, I can look into what their difficulty was with their registration. There could be a few different things that happen there, but yes, please have them contact me. The first question to the panel is, when a sponsor outsources the TMF to a CRO, what is the typical opportunity for transfer back to the sponsor at the end of the trial? That was asked by Betsy.
Well, maybe I can take that one. There are many different ways to get a TMF back. If you've got your own archive solution in which to ingest the TMF that the CRO holds, we can transfer the TMF in a mechanism that suits your archive solution. Sometimes sponsors want their TMF on the thumb drive or some form of media in which they can access the metadata and access the files themselves, and also the audit trails. And then also another solution that we offer is continue to host a version of the TMF in an archive format. So there are many solutions out there in terms of what to do at the end of the trial, and it really does depend on what you're looking for in terms of accessibility long term, once the actual trial has ended.
Yeah, great.
Sorry, Will, can I add a little bit to that? This is Lei too, and from the sponsor side, the other thing you may want to do is you might want to talk to your IT at your company as well to see, to get their input and let them be aware that you will be transferring in some TMF files, because depending on the size of the TMF, IT would want to house it in many different ways. So that'd be something that would be ideally for you to speak to your IT about before considering bringing it in-house.
Yeah, and one last point to that as well is define it up front. If you're trying to determine what to do with your TMF, at the end of the study, that can be challenging to figure out what is the right solution for you. So if you're working with a CRO, work with them to let them know what you're thinking. If you can define it in a plan or a process or some sort of agreement, do that up front. With the new TMF guidance that recently came out, there is quite a lot of guidance in terms of what to do in terms of archiving. So I'd encourage you to read the eTMF paper on that.
Okay, the next question was, for a small pharma where the CRO hosts the eTMF, how would you recommend the sponsor files their oversight documents in a way that the CRO can't see during the trial? The example being vendor contracts. That was from Stuart.
So this is Lei too. What we usually do is we've had that before where we use the CRO's TMF, and if there are certain documents that we don't want to share, we will file it in-house. And depending on if you guys are filing it electronic or paper, if it's paper, it would be in a secured area, and if it's electronic, same thing. But then we merge it into the final TMF at the end when the study is closed out. So it's okay to have a hybrid. You just have to make a note on your TMF sections for certain sections that you want to keep documents in-house, that those files would be kept at X, Y, and Z. So you can just say these files would be kept at sponsor and available upon request, so then that you will always know where to find the documents if you were to be audited at any given time. But then you can always just merge it later.
Hi, this is Laurel. Another way is directly in the system, specifically Trial Interactive. There are security settings that can be set for those folders to be hidden for specific users, whether it's a sponsor or a site or whatnot. You can actually set those security settings within the system as well.
Yeah, but Laura-Ann, the question was, this is a CRO system, and the sponsor wants to hold their files.
Understand.
So
thanks.
that's why, yeah. But if it was the sponsor's file, then Laura-Ann is correct that you can always edit on which sections which users can view.
Okay, great. The next question was, do you let the FDA or other agencies have access to the eTMF, meaning they have access to everything?
I've been through virtually every type of inspection, going FDA, BfArM, MHRA. So most regulatory authorities, you've got no choice but to let them have access to the TMF. So, for example, MHRA will want to access the TMF directly themselves. So it depends on the authority, but most want direct access to the TMF and have, let's say, 10, 15 minutes worth of training on how to do it. So that is something you need to consider and how you're going to provide that accessibility if they come. FDA's methodology is slightly different. They would normally ask for documents and then you provide them to them. But European regulators, they want to be trained on the system and given access to the system.
Okay. Do you always include the audit trials with return records, or must it be requested?
I can tackle that question as well. Yes is a quick answer. We always return the audit trails because that is part of the TMF. And again, there's a recent paper on this that's coming effective in June, and audit trails are specifically mentioned as part of the TMF. And again, European regulators, when they come and do a TMF audit, they will look at audit trails as part of the process. They want to see when a document was submitted, is it in accordance with the plan that you've written? Potentially they want to look at who's QC'd it. So audit trails are a vital part of the checking that the TMF is up to date and nothing's been submitted, let's say last minute because the auditors are coming. But they're very hot on that at the moment.
Okay, the next question is, how is your interpretation of eTMF guideline regarding archiving to maintain the system, hardware and software?
I'm sorry, Will, can you repeat the question?
It is phrased, how is your interpretation of the eTMF guidelines regarding archiving to maintaining the system, hardware and software?
Maybe I could start on this one, and then later Laura-Ann could add. So obviously a TMF should be accessible for a long period of time, or has potential to be should be accessible for a long period of time. So once the trial has finished and you are moving into a read-only state, you need to make sure that for however long you are retaining the data, the TMF, that is accessible in a readable format for the regulators or for the auditors. So, for example, if you try and open show my age, a Word 95 document in a current Microsoft environment, it may be challenging. So if you've got eTMF data that is coming from, let's say, a proprietary system, let's say a SAS data set, how are you going to ensure that it's available 25 years later? Do you have the mechanisms to open those documents and read those documents? And more importantly, can the regulator do that? So you really need to make consideration of, what's going in the TMF, and is it accessible in 20 years time? And that's why traditionally we used to have PDF-A documents in your TMF, because in theory they're guaranteed to be read. So you really need to make provision, for after the trial to manage that. And I think that's why some of the strategies are to just maintain the system in an archive format that's read-only, and then that in many ways stops some of the challenges that have been brought up during the paper.
Mo, that's exactly what I was going to say. I'll just add that the one thing that's important is to make sure that your process and your strategy is documented completely. And if something happens and there's a business need for changing that process, maybe again a software change or whatnot, make sure that is documented as well, so that you have that entire story to give the inspectors as well.
Yeah, and just also think about who you want to do it. As a sponsor, do you want to be maintaining legacy systems for 25 years, or do you want to, in theory, pass the problem over to a CRO or to a technical provider, and then obviously you can just oversee the process? So it depends on what your approach is to that. Do you want to manage those risks, or do you want to, I guess, pay somebody else to manage those risks on your behalf, and you just have the oversight? So again, I would define this up front so that it's very clear what the CRO needs to do, and also what you need to do as a sponsor.
Create a login specific for the auditor, or a generic login that can be provided?
Well, the beginning of that question broke out a little bit. Can you just repeat that?
Okay. Is the best practice to create a login specific for the auditor, or a generic login that can be provided?
I can speak first and certainly fill in on other sides, but I know in our recent experiences with inspectors, we created a user specific to that person's specific user access. We gave them a time frame of how long they could utilize that, and they had certain settings that they were set up for. They were granted access to the entire system, but their access level was set a certain way for an auditor. But I've seen it go both ways, where the inspector has just requested a standard username, but it can be done either way on our side.
Yeah,
Okay, the next
on
is,
our side of the things, our SOP says we have named users, so everybody should be trained individually. So that's how we grant access. So if an inspector sees, we'll provide them with their own account. And then once the inspector has gone, we would, decommission them from the TMF. But all users are named users in our process.
all right, the last question right now, unless anything else rolls in, is this is specific to the trial interactive eTMF. Does your eTMF have reports and alerts that can be configured for predefined measurements of completeness, quality, and cycle time? Those are the specific examples.
We do have those reports. We have completeness reports. We have workflow inventory and audit reports that process from submitted to completion of those documents, as well as a missing document report that will tell you exactly what's missing based on your required documents configuration.
All right, that was the last question on the list for today. There was a question about recording. The session has been recorded today. We won't just be distributing a file, but we'll be looking into how to make it available to people who have registered. So I will just wait another minute in case another question comes in. Okay, well, unless any other questions roll in while I'm closing up, I'll bounce right back into them if anybody has any. But for now, thank you for joining us. We hope you found the on-the-ground stories of the presenters today helpful. We'll continue to run webinars throughout the year, and you can find out about them on our TransPerfect Life Sciences LinkedIn page, or you can find out about them at trialinteractive.com. If you think of any questions after this webinar, or we didn't address something that you wanted us to address, or you just have any comments or feedback on the webinar, please contact us at webinars@trialinteractive.com. Again, if you had any questions specific to our panelists today, if you use that same email address, we'll make sure to direct your questions accordingly so that they can be answered. So we want to thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate your time, and we hope you all enjoy the rest of your week and weekend. And that'll be it for now. Thank you.
Goodbye.